Welcome to No Room for Phonies.
Episode 123.
And this is another book worth reading, and it kind of follows in the theme that we've had about relationships. And so this is called Safe People, How to Find Relationships That Are Good for You and Avoid Those That Aren't.
And it's by two of our favorite authors, some of our favorite authors,
Yeah.
Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend, also authors of the Boundaries
A series of books, yeah. And this is going to be another 2-part one because it's quite extensive. There's a lot. So the questions become, how can I learn to pick better friends? Why do I choose people who let me down?
How did I end up with this critical boss? And how do I attract irresponsible people? Sometimes we think we're magnets for
Yeah. Why did I invest money with that unscrupulous person? What is it about me that draws the wrong types to me?
And why am I drawn to the wrong types?
So safe people draw us closer to being who we were meant to be. So what we really need is character discernment.
We need people who are accepting and honest, present, encouraging, and look both inside and out. They look inside and out. No,
you have to look both inside and outside of yourself and stand back with a critical eye when you're looking at people.
Yeah,
Sorry
I understand.
to explain that wrong. So then they get into what is an unsafe person. And basically they say in the book that we are untrained in discerning the character of people. Does the person listen? Does the person come across as so perfect that you don't even want to share your struggles? Are you being controlled? Do they make promises and not keep them? Is there condemnation and judgmentalism? Am I
my worst self when I'm hanging out with them, or can I trust them?
So unsafe people can be hard to spot, but they make
4 categories. No, 3 categories.
3 categories.
The abandoners, the critics, and the irresponsibles.
Yes. So the abandoners are people who can start a relationship but who can't finish it. So they're shallow, they're afraid of closeness, they only want perfect friends, they destroy trust, and they make you feel depressed, or like they develop you develop some kinds of compulsive behaviors when you're with them.
And critics, they take a parental role with everyone they know and very judgmental. They speak the truth, but without love, and they have no room for grace or forgiveness. They're more concerned with confronting errors than they are with making connections. They're always indignant at the trouble others cause and expect everyone to think and feel and believe and act like them. They deeply love truth and righteousness, which is a good thing, I guess. They're clear thinkers, but the truth is poisoned with judgment. You will like their clarity of thought and purity of vision, but you will feel guilt-ridden, compliant, and unable to make mistakes without tremendous anxiety.
And keep in mind, as we're giving you this overview, the book goes into a lot of detail.
With a lot of examples.
Yeah. And then the irresponsibles don't take care of themselves or others. The problems, they have problems considering consequences, and they don't follow through on commitments. So you end up picking up after them. You're apologizing to others for them. You're making excuses for them. You give them chance after chance after chance. You pay for their sins and forgetfulness. You're nagging them. You're resenting them. They have a lack of dependability. So some of these are like alcoholism and sexual gratification and debt. And they often will attach themselves to an enabler to protect them. So we're talking about the codependence.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The irresponsibles, yes.
Yes.
I just find it interesting. I haven't read the book. That when you look at these 3 characteristics, I'll speak for myself. We all sometimes exhibit these characteristics.
Yes. But I think
we're not.
I think the difference is when a person is not safe, they have no awareness of what they're.
Yes.
So I
think it's continuous.
I might at times, my tendency would be towards the critic.
Mine
but
would
I'm
be-
aware of.
Mine would be towards the irresponsible,
But I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
So I think that is kind of the difference. So then there's some personal traits of unsafe people, and this is where I think it comes together.
right.
That they are not aware of what they're doing, that they're unsafe.
So they aren't self-reflective.
No. So they act as if they have it all together. They're self-righteous. They demand trust. They blow up if their facade of perfection rather is stripped away.
Whereas safe people admit their weaknesses and they're humble and they prove over time that they are trustworthy.
So here are some traits of unsafe people. They think they have it all together instead of admitting their weaknesses. So as a friend, you feel disconnected, like kind of one down.
Yeah, like scores being
Yeah,
kept.
weaker than you are, angry and hostile. You feel like you need to compete, to reverse the role. So you're kind of like you have to compete with their togetherness. And the unsafe person is not growing and is set up for a dangerous fall.
Right. Another characteristic is unsafe people are religious instead of spiritual.
And when I think of, religiosity rather than spirituality, I think of following rules and laws, basically, is what
and
I'm
having
thinking
no
of.
grace.
So unsafe people are defensive instead of open to feedback. Safe people are comfortable. Confrontation helps us learn about ourselves and change destructive patterns. So safe people are comfortable with some confrontation.
Okay. And unsafe people are self-righteous instead of humble, and they come across like they're better than
Yeah,
everybody
I've
else.
got the idea. I know what to do. Why are you doing it that way? Like all that stuff. Unsafe people only apologize instead of changing their behavior.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
You can get tired of.
So they do, I'm sorry I did that, but they don't ever change.
Oh, I'm sorry I came across as critical, or oh, I'm sorry I left that there and you had to nag me so many times.
So repentance means a turnaround, and repentant people will recognize wrong and really want to change because they do not want to be that kind of person. And something's happening here on the computer. Thank you. They are motivated by love to not hurt anyone like that again. So these are trustworthy people because they are on the road to holiness and change, and their behavior matters to them. And repentance has to be motivated by an inside desire to change.
Unsafe people avoid working on their problems instead of dealing with them. They won't admit that they have problems, so they don't forgive. They don't have empathy. They don't take responsibility. They have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
They don't want to learn to grow. They blame others, and they act unconscious about hurting others, and they're not aware of their own hurt.
Yeah. So I was reading a book today that was kind of like, it sounds like, well, how could you ever become involved with somebody like this? But I think it's easier than we think to actually become involved with somebody who is not safe. Like, I think it's a lot more subtle.
Well, like they said in the introduction, we aren't very good at discerning character
Right.
types, and
So we get into these situations. Yeah.
further involved.
And I think sometimes they are like a mother, a father,
or a coworker that you're kind of stuck with. For the long
yes.
run. You
Yeah.
can't just walk
Yeah.
away.
So unsafe people demand trust instead of earning it. They are above being questioned or having to prove their trustworthiness. They do not want to be tested. And the point is that we should always be open to an audit from the ones we care about. So
Unsafe people believe they are perfect, and they never admit their faults, and they attack anyone who threatens their image. They fight, blame, and point fingers readily.
And unsafe people blame others instead of taking responsibility. They externalize their problems. I did it because I had to. I had no choice. They stay angry, stuck, and bitter, and sometimes for life. and they deny and they blame.
Unsafe people lie instead of telling the truth. Deception is a strategy to cling to and to manage life and relationships.
And the last one is unsafe people are stagnant instead of growing. They do not mature or change. They are rigid. So then he gets into the interpersonal traits of unsafe people, how they
How they
connect with each
with-
other.
with us or
So
with each other.
basically, unsafe people avoid closeness. Instead of connecting, they isolate themselves with betrayal and broken confidence and addictions.
So
and-
you can ask yourself, when you're in a relationship and you're suspecting that it's unsafe, you can just ask yourself, does this relationship breed more togetherness or more isolation within
Right.
me?
And the other one is unsafe people are only concerned about I instead of we. Do you serve as an audience? I love this question. Do you serve as an audience for someone's conversation with themselves?
Well, that's why we have two of us on the podcast.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, like,
I'm
that's
joking.
that's an amazing
I
question.
know.
I think.
It is
like
because,
I've been involved in a lot of relationships like that. And then you're out of it and you think, all I did was ever listen to them talk to themselves.
and I tend to get really good at encouraging. to
You
keep
are.
going.
Yeah. And this is an empty experience. If unsafe people are self-centered, safe people are relationship-centered. And this shows itself in the all-important action of empathy. Safe people are empathic. A genuine connection is a mutual give and take of caring that flows between individuals. And empathy makes a relationship real and safe. Safe people act on their empathy.
And I think that's why, like, both you and I slip into these types of relationships with unsafe people, because we do work on
Right,
empathy. And we do work on
and listening
and it's
and
one-sided.
yes.
And-
But I think in
through
our
life-
minds, we're expecting, okay, so then when I need it, they're going to come through for me.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you find out,
Nope, not happening.
wait a minute, like I listened and then I said something and then they just went right back to talking about themselves again.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be within the same 2-minute conversation. It can happen over a period.
Yes,
of time.
but I've had that experience literally where I listen to somebody and I say, and whatever, and then I start talking about something and they literally cut me off
Mhm.
and start talking about themselves again.
Mhm.
So,
warning signs. When someone helps me, he uses it later to get something from me. So
Yeah.
like a kind of blackmailing.
and I never hear from someone unless they're in trouble. I've had friends like that, or they need something,
Yeah.
right?
I feel like a mirror. It's as if my job is to listen and approve.
I'm constantly on the giving end, either financially or time or resources.
And when my needs come up, he or she treats them superficially and then comes back to themselves.
And then he talks about unsafe people resist freedom instead of encouraging it. And I think this is another great question. What does the person do with my no?
When you say no.
When you say no, does the person make sarcastic digs because they feel abandoned? Do you feel bad when you are separate from someone? Separateness is the ability to maintain spiritual and emotional boundaries. So, and love actually withers and dies without separateness. You can't connect if you can't disagree. And enmeshment is when one person is swallowed up in the needs of another.
And do they respect my no when I state it? Do they withdraw emotionally when I say no? Do they get hurt and make me feel guilty when I say no? Do they have a life, like interests, hobbies, and friends separate from me? Do they encourage me to have a separate life as well?
And then unsafe people flatter instead of confronting us. Safe relationships are not just about trust, support, and sharing. They're also about truth and righteousness and honesty. And unsafe people condemn us instead of forgiving us. Unsafe people are often good at identifying your weaknesses.
Unsafe people stay in parent-child dynamic roles instead of relating as equals. Safe people respect our right to make decisions on adult choices. You need to feel equal when you are with your friends and not feel parented.
Right. And unsafe people are unstable over time instead of being consistent. You can't depend on them. If you look for stability and reliability in your emotional time commitments, look for people who are anchored over time and avoid flashy, intense, addictive types.
Going back to the previous point about parent-child, so there's the controlling ones are like parents, but also the ones that are like I can't remember the three categories anymore. The irresponsible ones, so they act like children constantly in the dynamic.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so some of the questions you can ask yourself: do they live up to their commitments? Do they tell me no when they don't have time? Do they make promises they can't keep? Am I the last in a string of broken relationships? Do others warn me about their pattern of relating? And
sometimes it's a little too late.
Well, and we've talked in my group that meets on Friday, we've talked a lot, and I think I've said this before, whereas if a friendship is if you always feel under stress, like if you think, oh, if I say no, that person's really going to be upset, or if, I choose to go a little different way, or, go see a different friend, or, like I can have friends from a variety of different pieces of my life, and all those friends don't ever get together in the same room.
Unsafe people are a negative influence for us rather than a positive one. And safe people make us better people for being around them. An unsafe person may make you feel good temporarily, yet wound you emotionally. And unsafe people gossip instead of keeping secrets.
And so how we lost our safety is another section that he talks about. And sometimes we lose our safety by just being envious. Envy makes us resent people who have something we don't have. And envy makes generosity sound unfair and is the opposite of love. And envy makes us resent our friend's freedom to say no. We make the other person feel bad for not giving us what we feel we need and want.
So they're kind of writing from within the brain of the unsafe person.
Yes.
What leads them to not be safe.
And envy wants to control. So, I've said this sometimes, about situations. Well, that person, wants to be part of my life because they want, they want to control you. They want to control you. They want they want to be involved in some of the things that you're involved in.
Yeah. Well, and they do kind of like you, but they don't want to be on an equal footing.
No, and they don't want to hear they don't want to have honest discussions about the things that you might disagree about.
There's an envy. There's a need that's being met.
Yeah. So sometimes we lose our safety when we think we are self-sufficient. We make friends with our needs and we need to make friends with our needs and welcome them because needs draw us into relationships. And we think then we think that we are somehow entitled to special treatment. People who are entitled are self-absorbed and grandiose. So entitlement is a demand for special treatment.
Don't get me into entitlement
this
month.
Yeah, no, it's a bad one. But entitlement, it gets us into so many problems. I mean, we could do a whole podcast just on entitlement.
I think we could do a year's worth of podcasts on entitlement.
So envy, self-sufficiency, entitlement, and transgression breed isolation. Isolation breeds life problems, emotional and behavioral and relationship. And so sins against us affect our development. So this is kind of how we become unsafe. So he gets into your past,
your family of
and
origin,
your family of origin, and if
a lot happens to us in our first 5 to 9
so we have to
life.
really come to terms with some of the things that have happened to us, like our bonding process was disrupted, so we deal with detachment or abandonment or inconsistency, criticism and abuse,
Yeah.
that impacts, unless we deal with it.
Right.
That
We
in,
stay unbonded,
Yes.
basically. Defensive devaluation is a protective device that makes love bad, trust unimportant, and people no darn good anyway. So it's like,
so,
well, I'm not going to make any friends anyway because they're not going to like me. And
right.
I'm fine by myself. I really don't need to hang out with
Just the
anybody
idea that everybody's bad anyway, so why would you bother?
else. Yeah.
And then our boundaries were not respected. So spiritual and emotional property lines, when we are clearly defined, we can carry our own loads and we know when it is appropriate to help others. Aggressive control is someone hurting us if we say no. Passive control is someone leaving us if we say no.
And regressive control is guilt messages if we say no. And limitlessness is someone never saying no to us.
So if you had any of that kind of an influence as you were growing up, those are the kinds of things that you actually have to come to terms with before you can kind of have some of these healthier
I
relationships.
love those 4 questions, those 4
Yeah.
types of.
So then he says, like a cup with no bottom, the grace and care the boundaryless person receives often cannot stay inside to nourish and sustain them. So he's telling us, and this is what he's saying, is that you have to become a student of yourself and you have to work on the problems that have disconnected you. And in other words, no matter how old we are, no matter where we are in life, we need to continue to mature and grow. And we need to avoid these things. And this is where we're going to leave things off for this time.
Okay. So first we need to avoid perfectionism, where we expect people to have 0 faults.
And then there's idealization, where we're denying our imperfections or the imperfections of others. We live in this fantasy world, I guess.
Yep. Shaming, where we condemn any negative qualities.
Splitting, seeing us or others as all good or all bad.
One-up relationships, being treated or treating others as children.
And then
keeping
the
score.
one-down relationships, which is being treated or treating others as if we were parents.
Control, needing to be in charge all the time.
And then criticism, someone attacking or us attacking someone if we challenge their thinking. So it's not that you're never critical. It's you are that way if you challenge the thinking.
And because of human nature and the fact that all of us have families of origins or don't have families of origins, whatever, that impact us, no matter how hard our parents try to do a good job, there's going to be gaps, which is why it's important to continue to work on ourselves. And
they are the Townsend.
Cloud
and Townsend are really big on that.
Yeah.
And like I say, this is like a snippet of what's there in the book available to you to talk about. So on November 15th, we're going to do part 2. So there we're going to get into, do I have a safety deficit myself? Do I have enough safe people in my life? Why do I choose unsafe relationships?
And
What-
then what
yeah.
are some false solutions to the situations? Why do I isolate myself from people? And where are all the safe people?
And then he gets into a whole bit about restorative friendships and equaling, like, should I try to restore this friendship or do I replace it? So he kind of ends on that note of when is it time to walk away?
Very interesting.
So that's it. That's a little, and I mean, like I say, we do these books worth reading to try to inspire you to go and read it yourself and kind of help yourself on that journey of growing and learning and maturing. I mean,
and I know I say I haven't read the book, but because I'm in the same room often when Pam is reading, she stops and reads me things. So I at least get 10-20%.
well, and I mean, I think I just finished my 139th book
Congratulations.
for
That's awesome.
2024, but I'm also not working, like, I mean, I do things, but I'm not like in a job. When I was working as a principal, I was reading so many things all the time that by the time I got home, I didn't want to read anymore.
And in those years, I had my own creative business and wasn't reading, so I
So-
had time to read. And now it's the opposite. So it's all
So
good. I wasn't judging.
there's
or
a
being critical.
no, but there's a season for things, right? And sometimes just
Mhm.
putting some of these things out on the table helps us, and maybe you get into a little internet search on, the things we need to avoid in our lives, and you can read different perspectives on things. And I mean, part of the reason that I really want to introduce all these books in this podcast is because life really is about hearing a bunch of different perspectives. And that is probably one of the most important things that you can do.
Right. And as the name of the podcast is, No Room for Phonies, we just want to lay it all there as it is.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks for joining us for Safe People, Part 1, and on No Room for Phonies on this end of the month, end of October.
For those of you who celebrate, happy Halloween.